All right, we should be recording. Do you see the problem in front of you? All right. So today we've got two problems to go over, but then I'm happy to go back through any of the exercises that you may have a question on. So let's just first look at these two problems, but please let me know if you got a question. So this first one, this is on page 1297 in your text. Again, it's the whole differential analysis review. And what we're looking at here is, do we do a store with the money or do we invest it in bonds? So it says here, on August 1st, the store is considering leasing a building and purchasing the necessary equipment to operate a retail store. Alternatively, the company could use the funds to invest $1 million at 4%, and they mature in 15 years. The bonds could be purchased at face value. The following data has been assembled. So what they did here is, let's first just look at the bonds. So that would be the $1 million at it's 4%. So 4% times $1 million at 15 years. That's a revenue of 600 grand. Which nice. There are no costs when we're looking at the bonds. As far as the retail store is concerned, it says there that for years 1 through 6, they would make $300,000 a year. Years 7 through 15, it's $400,000 a year. So we're looking at a total of $5.4 million in revenue. However, there's quite a bit of cost to run this store, and it says here yearly cost to operate the store excluding depreciation. So we're looking only at cash flow here. 200,000 times 15, that's 3 million. And then it says here the residual value of the store equipment. So there was $1 million worth of cost into the equipment. Take away the 50 grand that you're going to recoup again. So there's a cost to this equipment of 950,000. So when you compare the two, we're essentially ahead by 850 grand when we're looking at the retail store. Now, certainly there's a whole bunch of other factors that we're not considering, like, people and all the HR associated with people and all of those non-hard where you can actually put into paper what those costs are. So other levels of stress, if you will. So here's the store, and then the bonds, and then this differential. Let me talk just real briefly about this differential effect column. And some of you reached out to me about this on Cengage, and it was a great question because, to be honest with you, they do it different each way, and I don't have a great answer for you to tell you why does it appear one way in one problem and another way in another. And ultimately, this is the only number that really matters right there. If you see me circle the 850. Of course, this is fine. I'm okay with alternative 1 and how we calculate there, and I'm also very good about how you calculate alternative number 2. But this area right here is, to me, the least important of all of this. This is great. You need to know what it boils down to in both of these alternatives. And then here, we need to know the difference. We need to know the difference. Whether you want to call that a positive number or a negative number is, in my opinion, irrelevant. But you need to know what the difference is, and you need to know which one is, stronger than the other. Now, that doesn't help you a whole lot on Cengage, because in some of the problems you're going to see in Cengage, they want that 4.8 million to be a negative number, and then another problem, that 4.8 million needs to be a positive number. Even though you would say 5.4 million minus the 600,000, to me, you would have thought that would have been a positive 4.8 million, right? This is stronger than this by the tune of 4.8 million. Now, if you had the 600,000 in this column, it would, and the 5.4 in this column, you'd have a different alternative as far as a plus or a minus. So for Cengage, this isn't a very scientific answer for you, but if you know you got the number right, you all have a calculator and you can get to 4.8 million, and you put it in as positive and it said it was wrong, put it in as a negative, and I'm sure it's going to show it to you as right. But ultimately, it's this right here that matters. 4.8 million minus 3 million minus 950 is 850. This is the number that matters, 850, because we see a difference of 1,450,000 less 600,000 is 850 grand. I don't know if that helps you. Do any of you have questions on problem number 1 or the additional comments on this differential column? Yep. Yep. Exact. Yep. 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 So ultimately, Apolloni, what you would say is alternative 1 is $850,000 better financially than alternative 2. To me, that to me is so much more clear to understand. It's not so much the number or the positive or the negative of the number, but what is the difference? Or we can say alternative 2 is $850,000 less advantageous than alternative 1. So does that help? Yep, yep, yep. Anybody else on problem number 1? Okay. If we, oh, yeah, that's exactly right. Yep, yep. And then on problem number 2, we're looking at replacing of a machinery. So this printing company is considering replacing a machine that has been used in its factory for 4 years. Relevant data associated with the operation of the old and the new machine, neither of which has any residual value. So you got the old and the new machine data there. Annual non-manufacturing operating expenses and revenues are not expected to be affected by the purchase of this new machine. Okay, so if we continue with the old, we certainly don't have, proceeds from the sale of the old machine, and there's no new purchase and whatnot. But it's the annual manufacturing costs, and it said the annual manufacturing costs were 60. Where is that number? 6,100, is that right? No, annual manufacturing costs, including, so we're talking 23,600. 23,600 times 6, and that's our 141,600. If we go to the new machine, of course, here you see we have to purchase it, so 119,700. They give you that data. The annual manufacturing costs in this problem here is $6,900 times 6, 41,400. And then if you look back in the old machine, if they were to sell it, they're looking at 29,700. So that 29,700 is like your trade-in, if you will, offsetting the purchase price. So now what's important to see here is both of them have a loss, right? What we're looking at is both of them have a cash outflow. How much is greater than the other? Well, in this case, it would cost us more in cash to remain with the old versus the new by a difference of 10 grand. So the annual manufacturing costs are considerably more than the old. If you look at the old manufacturing equipment has higher manufacturing costs as compared to the new, to the level that it even covers the purchase price. So in this case, we would say it would be advantageous um, to move to the new machine, and we'd have a savings of about $10,000. Still, both programs have cash outflow, 141,000 or 131,000. It's just that the new will have a less demand on cash needs than the old. Questions on problem 2A? Yeah. Yep. You know, Apolloni, one thing I should mention with all of these problems, and it's a little unfortunate because like when you do it in Cengage, they pretty much have a prescribed way for you to do it, right? It's set up. They want you to put it into this format, and that's all fine. But ultimately, you know, if you get down to this number right here and you have it set up a little bit different, that's all fine, and you still will get to the same differential effect. Um, I think as long as you know what you're looking at when you're comparing, you know, alternative one and you're comparing it to alternative two, whether you set it up differently, which believe me, there are many other ways to set this up, you're going to get to the same answer. And that's fine. That's totally fine. Um, and sometimes I think how Cengage has it set up makes it a little bit more difficult to understand. And it's just one alternative. It may not have been the one that you would have thought of, but that's okay. I think as long as you just get to looking at what's the difference, you know, that's, we all know how to do that. What is the difference of comparing this one alternative to the other? Um, and if there's a common denominator in both, you know, you can leave it in both because it won't make any difference, or you leave it out of both if there's a number that is consistent with both. Um, but as long as we get to this differential number, we're good. Um, unless you have other questions, I'm going to just quickly, if it's all right with all of you, I'm just going to scroll way to the top where we did all the other exercises and just look, and I'm just going to highlight some differences here that um, that you should make sure you note out of chapter 25. So again, here again in exercise one, we're looking at the difference between do we lease it or do we sell it? And again, looking at it from a little P&L effect, what's their revenues, their costs, and then this is their profit. And then if they sell it, what does it look like? So again, ultimately, it's a $6,400 difference. I don't care if you note that as positive or negative, but what we're saying is alternative one is $6,400 more favorable than alternative two. I'm just going to scroll down through these. If you got questions, please, by all means, interrupt me, okay? Alternative three, alternative three. Exercise number three. Now what I want you to start to see is notice in a lot of these problems going forward, it all stays the same, except what's a big deal is whenever you discontinue something, we need to remember, of course, the revenue goes away because we're not doing it. All the variable costs go away. But what we end up forgetting is the fixed costs. Those fixed costs is what stays, no matter if you continue with that mango or if you end up discontinuing it. And that's kind of what they're showing in a number of these exercises going forward, that if you discontinue something, everybody always thinks, okay, let's discontinue, you know, a certain product. We're going to have all these savings. Well, not necessarily. You're going to still have the fixed costs associated with it. And you know what? Today is a perfect example of that with this whole pandemic. You know, I think, yes, yesterday, actually Saturday and Sunday, we picked up dinner for both evening meals, and you can tell these restaurants are trying to cover, if you will, their fixed costs. You know, they could have closed shop, and you know, there's a lot of places that have just closed, and then their column's going to look like this, right? They have no revenue, they have no food costs, no electricity costs, but they're going to still have their real estate taxes. And that's the problem right here. They're going to still have this big number down at the bottom, where if you're doing the pickup or curbside delivery, you know, you're going to still have your revenues. You'll still have your variable costs and electricity costs. But by having these up here, this revenue, and even though these costs are here, it's going to help cover some of these costs. Your profit might still be a negative. You might still have a loss. But by doing this curbside pickup, and the two places that we went to, my gosh, it was so busy. I had to think that it's making a huge impact. All right, here's another one. You know, we can get rid of everything. We can get rid of the children's shoes, but we're going to still have those fixed costs. And what they're trying to show you here is, and this is so true, like at Walmart, Staples. You know, you go to Staples and you pick up a box of, you know, paper clips. To be very honest with you, they're not making any money on those paper clips. In fact, they might even be losing. But when you go in and you buy that, you're going to probably buy, you know, a half a dozen other things that certainly has a much greater margin. And that's what they're trying to show you here is these children's shoes, it does lose, right? We're still showing a loss. However, the revenues and the variable costs associated with those children's shoes do cover some of these fixed costs. Unfortunately, not all of it, because there's still a $30,000 loss, but it covered 45 of it, right? You see that? It covered 45,000 of those fixed costs. So you get rid of it, now you're gonna have the full fixed cost with nothing to help offset it. So yeah, we're still losing, but we're losing less by continuing than if we were just to say, be done with it. Likewise, do you make it or do you buy it? Well, if you're making it, of course, you don't have a purchase price, but you do have your direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. But make sure we factor in what is the fixed overhead. And if we buy it, of course, we're not going to have direct materials, direct labor, or the variable overhead. We're going to have the purchase price, but we will also have the fixed overhead. So I said to you earlier, you could either eliminate this row altogether, right? You don't need the $1.80 in both columns because it's essentially even, makes no difference, or you must include them in both. So you have two alternatives. You either include them in both or you exclude them in both, and you will still get to the same dollar difference. So in this case, it made sense to, it was less money to make them versus buy them. Again, continue with the old machine or replace it. You know, this is exactly like problem, I believe, what was it? 1A, I believe. So here we replace it. So you're gonna have some proceeds, the purchase price, and then those variable, not fixed production costs. Differential analysis again on the wood. Do we sell it rough or do we process it further? And again, in this case, it looks like it makes sense for us to process it further to the tune of $10 per 100 board feet. Rejecting an order, of course, if we reject it, we have absolutely nothing to analyze. If we accept it, then of course we have to see once, is there a profit? Again, in this problem, they don't talk about anything on fixed costs. So the fixed costs, if you think about this, that fixed cost number would have been in both columns anyway, right? It would have been there in both columns. So in essence, you can take away that idea because we're now looking at, does it make sense to accept this order or to reject the order? That fixed cost is going to be there regardless if you take on this new project or not. So what we want to know is, keeping that idea out of the picture, are we even going to make any money on accepting this new order? And that kind of goes along with number 14, it's on the batteries. So what we need to know is, how low can we go and still make some money? Like here, how low could we go and still, if we went to 576,000 here in variable costs, we're doing a lot of work just to break even. We would probably reject the order. You're doing a lot of work, a lot of wear and tear, and all you're doing is breaking even. We would need to have costs less than the revenues for us to accept the order, because quite honestly, you're still going to have those fixed costs. And here's the same thing. We needed to know, what's the variable cost. So you have 40,000 batteries, there's $372,000 worth of costs. We need to at least sell those batteries for $9.30 or more. If we sell them for $9.30, we're just going to break even. And then this last one, number 20, I don't need to have you worry about this one as much, but what we're looking at here is, what is the contribution margin by the furnace hour? So we know what our revenues are, we know what our variable costs are, so we know what our contribution margin is by type, and then how many units, and that gives us a unit contribution margin, which right away you'd say, oh, it's got to be right here, type 10, or no, excuse me, you would say type 20 because it's $6. It has the highest contribution margin. The unfortunate part is, though, in type 20, it takes 12 hours for us to earn that, which comes down to 50 cents then per furnace hour. Or in type 10, this looks great, however, type 10 takes 6 hours, and type 5, $1.80 takes 6 hours. So looking at this all over, type 10 is the best because it not only has a very high contribution margin, not quite as high as type 20, but it has half as many hours in the furnace compared to type 20, half as many hours. So we want to focus on type 10 because we actually make more money on type 10 than we do on any of the other products. And then that gets us to the two problems that we started with at the beginning of the hour. Anybody have questions over chapter 25? Oh, good, good, good. Yeah. So, no, that's good. So then at least maybe I should teach it one more year. Otherwise. Anyway, I will stop sharing my screen here a minute. All right. Am I back? I don't know if I can tell if I'm back or not yet. Okay. All right. Anybody have any other questions for me? I appreciate you showing up today. I tell you, our last chapter is chapter 26. We are very much near the end. So you'll get an email from me today or an MS invite for chapter 26, and I'll tell you which exercises we're going to do there. And it will be probably how it will look is, you may have a day where we will not have to meet because we will be done, and we will just I know what your question is going to be. I wish we could take the final early. I don't think that that's going to be possible. They've been pretty concerned about that with everything being online and timing and whatnot. So unless I hear differently, we may just not have to meet for a class period, just because we'll be done, and I'm not going to make you log in for no apparent need. So There you go. Or at least give you some time to work on other things too. I know there's a lot of papers and whatnot. So, um, but if you have any questions, by all means, and we could always meet that day. I'll make sure we do a review and all of that. So all of that will get taken care of and all of that. So just my initial assessment, I look at my schedule. We may have a day that we won't need to meet, but we'll certainly make sure that we get through everything and we do a review and have all those items covered. So otherwise, folks, it's going to be another nice day. I think it's supposed to get to 77 here in Sioux Falls. For those of you that don't live here, we're still experiencing quite a bit of backlash, I think, if you will, on the whole Smithfield Foods. You know, there are still, I think they're saying 100 some cases are all connected to that Smithfield. So it's still pretty shaky here yet in Sioux Falls, but I trust it's going to get better. So, all right. You guys have a great day. Thank you.